Hello and welcome to the Built Environment Marketing Show, hosted by me. I am Abbas. I'm a marketer, a speaker and a trainer, and I work exclusively with architects, engineers and contractors. Something I've done for 24 years, which makes me quite old. Anyway, today is an episode which is repurposed from a live that I did with Michelle Garrett over on her show called PR Explored. Michelle Garrett is a B2B PR expert and she's lovely and she's based in the States. And she invited me on to talk about how to do PR and marketing for so-called boring industries. So we go through kind of lots of ideas and tips about actually stuff that we don't think is boring, but also about how to kind of bring these kind of firms and these types of kind of, I guess, industries to life. So really, really useful tips that are really applicable to architects and engineers. Anyway, I hope you enjoy it. Take care. Bye.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of PR Explored. PR Explored, if you haven't been here before, is a video podcast where we delve into trends and topics related to public relations and communications and marketing and everything like that. And I'm your host, Michelle Garrett. I'm a PR consultant and writer. And today I have a fabulous guest. I have Abbas. Io, I'm so thrilled to have you. You are one of my favorite people. And of course, we met on social media, which is where I've met so many, people that I know now in the marketing world. And so I'm just thrilled to have you here. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for inviting me on. I was like chuffed when that came through. I was like, yay! We were just saying before, weren't we, that it's funny how many people we connected with on Twitter, like Lord Westjet's Soul, right? It was just... But it was just that thing. It's like at the moment, I remember saying the other day, we were like, it's like we could get 30 to 40,000 views for not doing very much on Twitter.
Well, I know.
And now you're like, you're lucky. I mean, I came off it over a year ago, but 500 or whatever. And you're like, that's a lot. I mean, now it just doesn't work. It's really sad.
Yeah, it was good while it lasted.
Yeah, definitely.
It brought a lot of us together that probably would have never maybe met if it hadn't been for Twitter. So
So true.
And I wanted you to be here we're going to talk about these boring industries that you and I both, tend to gravitate toward. But before we get into that, I know your background is in marketing and you said you have some PR experience. I'd just love for you to tell us a little bit about you and what you do and how you got who you are and all that good stuff.
So my name's Abbas. I call myself I'm a marketing consultant, but I guess my background is I originally started off in PR. So I started working in 2001, January 2001. That's how old I am. And I started working in construction PR. So I worked for a PR agency and our clients were manufacturers. So they made carpet tiles, lighting, all of that kind of stuff. And they were very much about marketing those products to architects and contractors and all of that kind of stuff. So that is what my background was. So I did lots of writing, having to pitch, find stories for literally nothing. And then after that, after about 3 years, I moved in-house and I started working for engineering companies. And I'm then working for some small practices and then onto much larger global firms. And that's probably where I spent most of my career, kind of engineering construction companies who are marketing themselves business to business. So talking to governments, corporates, local authorities, all of that kind of federal. And that's kind of always been the arena that I play in. But yeah, so like you say, the things that I enjoy doing are, right now for my company, which is Abbas Marketing, which I started just in February 2020. I work for myself and I kind of work with a range of firms on their kind of marketing strategy, content creation. I love creating content. So writing, podcasting, all of that kind of stuff, lives. But also, running campaigns and kind of getting them better at kind of digital marketing and that side as well. So that's kind of what I do now. So yeah, that is me.
Yay. No, I love that. I didn't know about your background in PR when I never really knew that you had done that. So I think this is even more appropriate because you can.
But it does, but I just think it gives you a really good grounding. Having to write about a carpet tile. It's just,
Yeah.
and it's about durability. It's about, like all this kind of different stuff. And I think if you can really kind of get to the nuts and bolts of why something is different and it's an object, it's way easier when you're doing services now and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, having to learn that was a huge thing. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think it gives you a great foundation for a lot of other, marketing related jobs. But yeah, no, we're pretty well-rounded. We PR folk. We can write and we can do messaging and branding, and we can do all kinds of things. So yeah, but now this topic, this boring industry thing. Now, when I say that, I don't mean that I think their industries are boring. However, I know a lot of people who do PR for like the beauty industry or the fashion industry, and they have, it's more glitzy, more glamorous, more, there's like, I don't know, maybe more events and things like that.
Yeah.
When I work with a lot of manufacturing clients, and of course I work with B2B clients pretty much solely, and you work in construction with construction clients. So I just feel like sometimes people don't understand what is the appeal of working with those types of clients and in those industries. And I feel like there's just so much to share, and I find it really interesting. But I want to hear you. Just what's your perspective on that?
You know what? I think when I speak to people, just generally when I'm out and about, and not with people from my industry, and I sort of say what I do, and people sort of look at me and go, is that really a thing? Or is that really a job? And I think one of the things that I love about what I do is that actually, I probably wouldn't find it that interesting promoting shampoo. The smell, the color, the texture. No, it's true. And I think what I find interesting is actually trying to find, what is that angle, that hook for a B2B business. And the thing I love about B2B business is there's less competition, but it's bigger sales and there's more things to do, and I think the size of the opportunity is in many respects greater, right? One B2B sale could, take 2 years to get off the ground, really, in terms of like the sales pipeline. But actually that will be, volume wise and contract value wise can be way higher than, buying a shampoo off a supermarket shelf. So for me, that's kind of why I love it, is that challenge of then trying to understand how to connect. You've got multiple audiences and people who are influencers, and there's just so much that you can do. And that's why I don't think it's boring. And I have to admit, I wouldn't think it was something that, I would necessarily have thought I've gone into, but I love it here because of that. I think that's the challenge. That bigger sale and trying to kind of just get more in depth and understand how to connect with people and that audience to buy it.
Yeah. I think I think that is exciting to me, because it does kind of cause you to kind of look under the hood and, find the things that are maybe interesting that sometimes I think the people working in the companies don't see it because they're down in the weeds. Their head is down in their work. So they need somebody to come in and kind of say like, oh, wow, that's really cool. Have you ever talked about that? Have you ever?
No. And they didn't even realize it was cool. That's the other thing.
Have you showcased that client, or have you told that story, or like, and often, it didn't even occur to them. So that's why I feel like it's kind of, it can be really fun. And then they also, their expectations many times are, they don't always know, like they don't have the same maybe idea about some of these things that other clients who might, have higher expectations or maybe, just be more demanding in some ways. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but I think...
No, I get what you mean, though. I think I never forget when I started working on a large construction project and I sat next to like the project director for this like trains, who's designed this huge train station. And I remember sitting next to him and like, I just joined that company and, I made simple things. I made him a banner, literally, because nobody in that organization had really cared about his project. He was so happy by it. I was just like, it's just a pull-up banner. But actually, those little things matter. And I think a lot of it is showing you care and that you have an interest in what they're doing. And then they trust you and you become part of that team and then you can do more. And I think that's lovely when you start to build that relationship and you become their go-to person as well. So I think there's those types of things where, because they're not always the kind of most loved projects, or people don't realize how important they are.
Mm-hmm.
Quite often these boring industries are like, they're the bottom line of so many companies, right? They're the ones that are tugging away and like always turning over the money. So yeah.
No, there are just like so many stories to be told there. And I feel like sometimes, again, it's like people they just look at the surface of whatever's going on. They don't really look and see what's, like, for example, I worked my first job that was kind of more in the manufacturing realm was at a welding institute, but like welding, like who cares about that? Well, bridges, skyscraper. I mean, there's a lot of like and stuff that keeps us safe, because if it's not done right, it can, crack or fall apart, or, and it's a big deal. So there's stories about that too, just safety and, just things that really touch people's lives that they don't necessarily think about every day. But when you do, it can be pretty interesting.
Exactly. So yeah, no, I completely agree with that. Yeah.
So when you're working with clients of these industries, do you ever find them to be kind of stuck as to what type of stories or information would make good PR or marketing content?
I do think there is this thing where a lot of people don't know what good looks like. And I think a lot of what we have to do is show them and ask the questions of, and I find a lot of it is, it's not dumbing stuff down, but it's also just trying to ask them questions that will really get down to the nub and, that point that makes them stand out and differentiates them. So I think quite often it's for us as PR people and communicators, it's for us to delve in and really find those stories. And I think quite often people don't, like we said earlier, people don't realize those stories are powerful. And they don't even realize they're there half the time. So, yeah, I do think it is one of those things where people just don't realize. So it's hard to really, really question them.
Yeah. And so I think you made this point a few minutes ago about when you have somebody from the outside, an external consultant, for example, come in, they may be able to see things that you wouldn't see because you do it day in and day out. And you're just like, okay, this is my factory or this is my job site or whatever. I'm not really looking at, I'm just trying to get the work done, but I've never really thought about it looked at it through those eyes before. So I think you can kind of teach them too, to start looking for stories that might make good, subject matter for your PR and content folks to be working with.
I think a lot of it is it's an education process though, isn't it? It's literally you're coaching them through that process. And I think once people start to see, actually, that got a piece of coverage, right? This is what we need to do. And you start learning step by step. And I think that goes for in-house people as well. When they're inside a company, it can be, like you say, so hard to kind of see that actually that really is a story, or that really benefits this type of customer, or all of that kind of thing. And you're right, as an external person, we can definitely bring those eyes and that vision. And sometimes that enthusiasm, because I think a lot of it is actually being infused about what they're doing. Because I think people get a bit kind of down. Well, they do. You know what I mean? They're like, oh, well, when I go home and my wife doesn't want to hear me talk about this. It's like, well, actually, this is actually quite interesting.
Yeah. No, I know. Somebody appreciates their stories and, all the details and everything they have to share. And I think they think that's exciting. It makes it exciting for them. And I find it to be really cool when I can kind of pull that out of a client or a customer of theirs or something, when they kind of get them on a roll, and they'll just start going down the path.
Do you find you are now a nub of like, you just know lots of random facts about random topics? It's something like, and everyone's just like going, how do you know this?
I don't. Well, right now, thank you for bringing this up, because there's two things. So I've been working with writing content on asphalt, of all things, on highways and things, and like how the length, the light, the lifetime, the lifespan of it, and how what makes it safer, and what things, what's more ecologically friendly and just all these things that I
There's
would
a lot
never
on that at the moment, isn't there? Us like, laying roads and making them more, because I think it was quite wasteful and unsustainable the way it was being done, right? And there's this whole,
yeah, because there are things you can put on there to preserve it. And then there's runoff and like, anyway, so see, here I go. I'm going, but, and I, like it came up I started talking, to my kids about it at the dinner table, and they're like, yeah, we're whatever. No like, but, I know a lot of things that I never really dreamed of, before. And now when I'm driving, I'm like, oh, like, I wonder what, how they laid this, freeway, and like, if they've done anything to preserve it, or like, so it's interesting. I find it really interesting, but I can kind of geek out about stuff like that, so
yeah.
And then food, there's a bunch of, of course, there's a lot about food inspection in the news, and I work with some food processing companies, and there's no food company that wants to make consumers sick. Okay. So regardless of whether, there are inspectors or standards, or they have their own processes, and no, they do not want to make people sick. So there are things that I know that are helping me feel as a consumer just a little bit less, I guess, nervous, because I just see a lot of people really getting, at least in the States, getting kind of nervous about that kind of stuff. And I'm like, hey, you just think about, companies don't want to hurt people. They don't want to harm anyone.
They don't want to get sued.
No, and it's expensive to recover your reputation. Anyway, so there are all these things. And I mean, I think it's cool. And then, like when things come up in the news, you're like, yeah, I get it. Like, I see, like, I have a different perspective on this. You feel really smart sometimes. You're like, wow.
But also, do you find, because you work in PR, like, can you look at the news and stuff through a normal person's eyes, or do you? Because I know when I was working in house, one of the things that I always thought was, I used to just always read the papers and just be like, who's put this story here? Who's planted it? Whose angle is this? Like, that's how I used to read the media, because it gets this page where that's what I used to see.
Yeah. I think it's tough because you can't go without looking at it, right? I mean, when you work in PR, you kind of have to be a news hound a little bit. I think it's the sources that you look at. And because I do work with a lot of like B2B clients, I'm looking more at industry specific news, maybe not some of the more inflammatory or anxiety inducing coverage of things, like I not that I don't see those things, but I don't, like, I can choose to kind of tune out a little bit if I need a break or whatever. But there are definitely things going on that are impacting some of the industries that I have clients in. So, I mean, I from that perspective, it's good to know, like, what the word on the street is as far as, how we're going to be handling different, things that are going on. So
definitely. Yeah.
Interesting times. There's no lack of really topics currently. There's nothing boring going on right now. So let's put it that way.
And sometimes I'm like, please slow down. This is a lot.
It is. It really is. Gosh. Oh my gosh.
Hi, it's Io here, and I just wanted to interrupt the show quickly to say a bit more about what I do. I'm a digitally led marketing consultant, and I specialise in working with built environment firms just like yours. I think there's so much more that AEC firms can do to make the most of the digital marketing opportunity. And if it's something that you would like to explore working with me, how to make the best of online and in-person worlds, then do get in touch. Email me at io, which is AYO, at abbasmarketing.com, and let's have a chat.
So the next question that I was going to ask you is about how to kind of draw the stories out, because it isn't always as easy as, sometimes, there are a lot more things going on than others in certain industries. And sometimes you kind of have to, you might see something or talk to a client about something, but I feel like sometimes they don't have details. Like it's hard for them to think the way that we need them to think in order to pull out and share. Sometimes I want numbers. I want how much time they saved, how much money they saved, how did this change what they were doing, so I try to ask I have, like a set of questions, but then I also have like some questions to ask, like to try to draw them out, but sometimes it's just hard to do that. So do you have any?
I find, like with engineers and stuff, that they quite often engineers don't like giving like this will save you X amount. They find it really hard because they're so precise in what they do. So they're like, oh, we wouldn't say that, So you have to kind of find ways around like questioning them, because I think some of these numbers where you're like, okay, so that would cost you how much normally, and how much would that save by this, whatever. And I find sometimes they don't want to be that specific for that reason, because they, they're like, well, I haven't calculated fully. And, so it's numbers are great if you can get hold of them. But for me, it's questions, just asking loads of questions. Why are you doing this? How is it being done? How's it going to benefit the project, the client, or whoever? What does that mean? What's the final outcome? Like really kind of digging in. And I guess when I talk about, I've worked in bids and proposals, and one of the things we'd always go is, so what? So what does that mean? So how does that benefit? And, that so what method of just drawing out that real kind of nuggets in the detail. And I think that's when you start to find the gems of really good stories and content. But I think questions are good. Sometimes if showing people what's being done by others is another good way. What good looks like. Here you go. Look, this is what they did. This was probably how they tackled it. Just to kind of, because I think once you see something, it's easier to kind of comprehend what you need to do to get there. Yeah. Otherwise, it can just be a bit too far and a bit too distant, I think. So showing them that. And I think as well, like breaking down why things have been done in a certain way, why they work, what parts don't work in some of the stuff that you're seeing externally, and just showing people, I guess, again, what good looks like. So I think for me, it's that type of stuff helps to draw out stories.
Yeah, I really like that. Examples of what good looks like, because if they aren't really familiar with what you're trying to do, you have to kind of maybe show them a couple of examples of what competitors are doing, or just a similar, industry, or someone in a similar industry might be doing. So they have an idea.
And actually, that took me back. Actually, when I worked in house, I remember that I did a presentation where we had a director who had been speaking at a conference. And then I did a presentation to the engineers in that firm who were like congratulating him. So I did a presentation. I said, that was 6 months of work. And I took them back, like from me pitching that story to me briefing him, to me doing, all of the little steps that they hadn't seen, but they would just congratulate him at the end. And I think making people aware of the fact that if you're going to pitch, like to be a conference speaker, or you're going to be doing all of that kind of stuff, that these are the steps that it takes. And yes, you might need to plan, and then you've got your talking points, and then, and I think people don't always realize how long stuff takes, especially in what we do. So for me, doing that 6 months, people don't realize. And that goes for our clients as well. When we work with people and they're like, oh, that shouldn't take 2 minutes. It's like, no.
Well, you have to interview multiple people, and then you usually have to get approval if you've talked to people from various, companies or vendors or customers or whatever. So, I think it can kind of, sometimes it drags out longer than you think, especially if they have to run it by their legal team or whatever. So I try to really plan ahead. The other thing I was just thinking about is that I try to place the clients, the customer stories sometimes in trade publications and things. Yeah. And there's one publication that always wants to talk to the customer themselves. They don't want you to just, you can send over what you've prepared, but they want pictures taken inside the customer's, facility, and they want to speak to the customer. And so that has also kind of shaped a few of the things that we've worked on, because, if the company doesn't get that, they have to go back and ask for it. So it's better to go in with prepared to know, like, what are we going to need to really tell the story? So, and not every company will give permission
to do that.
Yeah.
But that's really important. I think you're right. Giving them this is how it works, because they're not going to know that. Then that's huge. That's definitely huge. But I think as well, even just stuff like posting to social media, right? It can take you an hour to do it properly. Like, all the different variants, right? All the different formats. Actually, this one has 5 hashtags. That one does this one. But then if someone's saying, oh, it's just 2 minutes to post to social media, it's like, well, no, it's not actually. It to do it properly is this. And so I do think there is that whole kind of education process and just taking people through what's really involved in doing good work for what we do.
Yeah, because there can be a lot of things that they didn't really think about. And I do think, to the social media point, it's like people just think you're just going to, pop it up there. And I'm like, yeah, well.
Someone's doing that. You might want to worry.
Well, and half the time you get to that point, I mean, I find this to be true too, or, even with pitching a story, I'll be like, well, where are the visuals? Like, we don't have, again, I've tried to get them to think like through this when they are at the customer's facility or whatever, or if they can't get permission to do that, we have to think of something else, okay, well, what else can we send? Because the visuals are super important. I know for trade publications, they always want photos. And even if they don't ask, I like to send some because chances are they're going to use them. And it's the captions, you can put branding in the captions. And I'm always
it gets you much more space, doesn't it, in the magazine? It's like,
yeah. Oh, yeah. So it's just something. And sometimes the clients are not thinking about that stuff. And so it's kind of a training. Like you have to kind of, I don't want to make it sound like, but education is a better way to say it, but you are trying to help them understand what you need to be successful on their behalf, I guess. So how about on the topic of examples, let's talk about, can you share a couple of, compelling stories that you've uncovered while you've been working with clients that you think are?
So yeah, there's a couple. I did. I'm currently coming to the end of a rebrand at the moment, and what's been quite nice is like interviewing the founders and just really starting to understand their business, what makes them stand out, and having those conversations, which I find when I'm working with founders, especially startups, they don't necessarily realize what makes them special. So actually kind of having those conversations, why did you set up? What was your story? What did you think wasn't working in the market? That's all fantastic stuff for a rebrand, but it's also, that's amazing content to then use in marketing campaigns afterwards. So I think running kind of campaigns like that and just working with founders and just really getting those stories out about why they set up their business, what really drives them, their values, their purpose. I think all of that can lead to so much rich content. And I find when I do those types of brainstorms with people, that's probably where the biggest kind of nuggets of gold come from and the best stories. So yeah, that's what I'm doing at the moment. I've done others where I've worked with, people who are trying to break a new market. So like I did a thing with a company called Minimath where they have like 3D printed concrete beams where they use like a third less concrete. Really interesting and innovative product. But actually, when you start speaking to the founders about, why they've done it, why they set up, again, it's more those amazing stories. But also working with them to understand, I guess, how to tackle different audiences and what they will want. And really kind of looking at things like micro influencers in the industry who could help them to get their story out there and who they need to connect with to take them to the next stage of where they wanted to be with their startup. So that's the kind of stuff that I've been doing that's kind of interesting and those much deeper and richer conversations, definitely.
Yeah, I think those are great examples because, it's like, I just don't know that people would ever think about some of the stuff that's going on. I mean, there's a lot of coverage of stuff that maybe, is like overdone. Like we see too many stories about things, but then there's all these things that are going on that nobody really like the 3D. I'm not sure that there's enough about that, and
no, but it's actually, you can start to look at it and you think, we do need to use less concrete. We do need to be more sustainable, like you said about the asphalt, right? And it's people are looking at how do we change these materials and how we're using them, and that will apply globally. That's a huge thing if you can start to change how we use these materials, because sustainability, climate change, all of that stuff is there, even if you're in America. But you know what I mean? So yeah, those stories really do resonate with me because I think we can really move the needle on terms of our industries. And I think that's really important. So yeah.
And again, back to the point of regardless of what, anybody else may be doing, the government, the industries themselves
we've got to change
things that are going to make them more sustainable. Or I think a lot of people, just in the industry are going to be, interested in things that they can do that are, maybe it falls under, ESG or whatever, but, maybe they won't talk.
It's efficiency. That's what it is.
Yeah.
More efficient use of resources and time and effort, right? And technology can do that, just different ways of applying what they're doing. So I think that there's a whole strand of that stuff, which regardless of your political views, which just makes perfect business sense. So, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So we're going to continue to see industries innovate and do things that make sense, because it doesn't, like, again, they want to make money and they want to serve their customers, and customers, want more sustainable solutions and things. So, I mean, regardless, we're going to see that of what's going on. So thank you, Tom. So I'm all about repurposing content for clients and myself. And I feel like that's just an important, and I know sometimes people get tired of hearing that term, but it really cannot be, I don't think we can talk about that enough, because again, I feel like a lot of times you work really hard on a piece of content. We've talked about how much time it could take and how much effort it could take.
Yeah.
And it goes up maybe on their website or maybe on social media. And then it's like, okay, that's like nothing else. Like, what else are you going to do with that? So let's talk about that a little bit.
I think for me, one of the things is, like you say, you spend a lot of time it takes a long time to produce a good piece of content, right? And I think if you only are sharing about it once on social media or something, then you're missing out on a huge opportunity to get your story out there. And I think you've got to look at kind of multiple ways to post in multiple formats, multiple times, and to really kind of just get it so that, you could pull a quote out of a piece. You could just take the headlines out of a piece. You could make a carousel. You could turn it into a podcast episode. You could, so I think there are so many ways that you can take a piece of content and really share it. And each time you could just be directing straight back to that blog piece. And I think if you kind of bear in mind that, especially with the algorithms nowadays, what are they doing on LinkedIn? It's showing to a small amount of your followers. Then if people engage with it, then they might be showing to more. But ultimately, it's never shown to everybody you're connected with. So actually posting something multiple times in different ways will appeal to different audiences, right? And different people will be online. So I think we've just got to get away from, it's a one-hit wonder. You just post once and that's it. It's like, well, no, actually, how else can you do this? And, you could phase that over a while, a number of weeks, once a week, linking back to that blog post. There's nothing to stop you doing that. Have it as a carousel, have it as a podcast episode. So just lots of ways of just driving that traffic. And I think once you start to get that out there more, then your messages will resonate more as well.
Yeah, no, I love that, because again, I feel like we just, plop it up there. You work so hard, and a lot of people, a lot of hands, a lot of interviews, a lot of, time and effort. And then it's just like, okay, here it is. And then, but you're right. Like, I think we have to get over this in our head sometimes too. It's like, we think we've posted about it, so we can't post about it again. But I think if you're creative in the way that you do it, I mean, even if somebody did see it 2 or 3 times, so what? Like, I mean,
times does it take for something to resonate with somebody and stick in their minds? It's more than once. It's way more than once.
Yeah. Well, there used to be the advice, like, you don't want to just share the same exact thing across social media platforms either. So I feel like if you can just, change it up a little bit, even, I think it's fine. And you are going to hit different audiences. And it's important to know where your audiences are spending time, or your primary audiences. And I like to try to repurpose content for clients in trade publications sometimes. So even if it's already on their site, we can still pitch it as a, customer story, or maybe thought leadership piece or something like that. And then do you not
find that publication's all right with that? Because here that would be a bit funny.
Oh, would it?
Yeah, it'll be slightly different here. Here it would need to go in your trade publication and then onto your website, because if it's on your website, it's kind of like
it's already out of the bag.
Yeah.
Maybe nobody saw it. I've done it both ways. As long as it's okay to republish it after it's appeared, I think that's also fine. But I just feel like you can get a lot more out of it, because then once it shows up in the trade publication, you can share that across social. And that's like definitely a different piece of content than the one that might have already been on your site or whatever. So I like to consider it anyway and see if there's stuff that we can do that. You can't always do it, but.
No, but it's worth it. It's worth it. Especially like you say, it's a lot of time, isn't it?
Yes. And I mean, some of the trade publications that I work with for clients are just, they have very small staff and they need content. And so, yeah, if you can provide literally like package it up in an email with the visuals and the written, story, and they'll often just run it. And then, I mean, you just kind of make it easy for them. But it's not, it's not that there wasn't a lot of work that went into getting ready for that, but you definitely can do that in some cases. Again, not all the time.
Definitely.
I don't know if there's what other points you'd like to share.
I don't know. I mean, to be honest, for me, there aren't really boring industries. I love what I do. So your title was misleading. So no, that's it really. I mean, yeah, I think you can find an interest in most topics, to be honest, even I can. Definitely.
Yeah. I agree. So I don't, I know that sometimes when I talk about what I do there, I can just see people kind of be like, like they're not, it's not exciting, because I think when they think of PR, they think of they do think of beauty or fashion or, like parties or whatever. And I'm like, well, it's not all like that. And that's, I kind of have made a career out of working with companies that, are not in that space. And I really have found it to be pretty fun and rewarding and always never boring. So that's for sure.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I agree.
Well, I think, unless there's anything else, I think we should maybe leave it there. And and I'll be back in a couple of weeks. And I have a guest that I'll be announcing soon. So I hope people can join us for that. And I want to thank Io so much for being here. I'll put your website up again just so people can pop in there and check out all of you have a podcast too.
I have two
podcasts.
I have two podcasts. So I have one called The Built Environment Marketing Show, which is where I interview architects and engineers about how they market their companies. And then I also have one which I do for a client, which is about integrated transport delivery. So I interview people who are helping to kind of deliver the infrastructure across the UK.
Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah. So I do that. So I host and produce too.
Well, that's a lot of work right there. So
precisely. But yeah, no, I told you I love content. So yeah, no, I really do. So it's good. It's good fun.
Yeah. Well, I hope everybody will check those out and follow you on LinkedIn and take a look at your site. And I just
say hi.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, and honestly, Io is just one of the most approachable and lovely people that you will ever meet on social media and maybe in real life someday. I don't know. Maybe we'll be able to.
You were talking about coming to the UK, weren't you?
I have talked about it. Yeah. My daughter and I were thinking about doing that, but I don't know if we're going to make it this summer, but eventually.
At some point. Yeah.
We'll make it back over. So
no worries. Anyway, thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you, Io.
Thanks so much for listening to the Built Environment Marketing Show. Don't forget to check out the show notes, which will have useful links and resources connected to this episode. You can find that on abbasmarketing.com. And of course, if you like the show, please do share it with others on social, as it helps more people to find us. See you soon.